Approve the minutes from September 10th. I read through them. I had some questions, but I assume the questions are going to be answered today. I just need approval. Motion to approve the minutes. Okay. Glenn and Jenna. All in favor? Say aye. Okay, approved. Is there any public invited to be heard? I encourage them to come occasionally. Things always kind of organizational updates.
I think staffing is what we should focus on first here. So we are interviewing for the regional manager. We have held 4 interviews that concluded yesterday. We're planning on shortlisting and hopefully bringing people back early next week to do a broader group interview and dig in on people and give some scenarios and try to just dig deeper. So hopefully we'll have someone hired here this month would be great. On Lauren's side for hiring in terms of maintenance and property managers, where are we at right now?
We have a new property assistant community manager starting on the 21st. So this will be our 3rd that we're hiring. And that will round out the property management team. Assuming we hire regional. And then we will be hiring a new maintenance person. We are anticipating to get board approval for the budget for next year and approval to hire that position early now because we are short. And then our maintenance supervisor is on paternity leave through the end of December. It's part of the reason why we were short-handed. So we're going to fully staff up.
Where's your assistant property manager?
She'll probably float between Village on Main and the Aspens, because we have one at Fallen Spring Creek and we have one at Sweet Cincinnati. She'll probably start learning there first, and then I'll probably also have her do some time over at Stone Lodge, because Andre is pretty much the only one that works on that property, and it's a little bit different than our other properties, and then I'll start having other people train over there. We need to share the knowledge and the wealth of information, so I really want to do that too.
Anything else?
I think that's all from us.
And we're going to hire an accountant as well.
Well, that's the hope with the budget.
Yeah. If we get the budget approval next week from the board, we're also going to have to hire another accountant.
I think that's it for organizational updates. Carol, you didn't have anything else for that?
No, I'll dig into that with the budget.
Okay.
Okay, development and project updates.
All right, so it was a very, very eventful month. We were due to substantially complete and get a permit letter saying so for Village on Main by September 30th. And we ended up, that was Monday, and we got it on Friday. So we met our development timeline for that. That was really critical because with the deal that we negotiated with the investor, and we wanted that substantial completion by that time to not face a downward adjustment on tax credits. And we said we could do it, and we did it. So that was great. There's still work happening at Village. We had furniture installed on what day was it? This last Friday, but there's still more coming, and we still have punch list items, and we're still doing final cleanup and that kind of thing. So we've got a couple holds for potential grand opening dates, but we want to see we want more of the furniture and want it to look a little more finished because it was coming in multiple orders. So it's either going to be late October or early November, and so we want to make sure that this group gets that invite because it looks really great. It's really beautiful, and I'm very proud of the work that was done, and the residents are all happy generally at the end. They said, we were so worried, and it looks great. So there's always little tweaks and fixes that you do at the end and making sure everything's really tip-top shape, but that's where we're at now. So that was a big milestone. And then for Ascent, we finally did close.
Kind of,
Oh, sure.
And honestly, I didn't go by there today. So
Okay.
is the sign out front still say village west?
Yes, it's getting replaced. It's coming in November.
Okay.
That's one of the items that we we're hoping to have before we invite people for a grand opening, but we also, that's not one that we might wait for because we'd rather have good weather. So, but that is still definitely coming. We did the base of it to match the brick, but they'll just be sliding in a new insert here soon. That would make it look very finished. Any other questions about Village?
I think they're just excited that the noise is.
Yeah, it's already a lot quieter.
Yeah.
The furniture looks awesome. So for Ascent, we did finally close on the same day, on September 27th. And so that was a big project and a big push, and we are now in construction, active construction. So I encourage everybody to drive by and just see the action. That construction is anticipated to go through. Did you hear this morning if there's an updated end date? Because I never heard it. It was January, but because we pushed a few weeks, it might be February 26th at this point.
I didn't hear that.
Expect February 26th, I'd say, but we could get that nailed down. And so that was just a huge accomplishment. We also had a deadline of September 30th, and so we were closing it on Friday the 27th at about 6:30 p.m. our time, and we had East Coast banks doing it at 8:30 on Friday night. It was, but if we didn't, we would have to redo all the signatures, and so it's like, we're not doing that. So it got done.
Are there water trucks over there?
There should be water trucks for dust.
Just cut down on the dust.
There should be. So I'll triple check, but that is pretty standard for when you've got earth moving going on. So that's Ascent. It was a big week. And then also 2 days later, 2 business days later, Zinnia opened and we had move-ins start. So it's been a very, very massive week. My face looks tired because I was laying down on the doctor's table, but I think everybody else can use the excuse of the projects that we're all ready for a little bit of a, let's take a breather and coast for a minute, but all that settled. So it was just very big. And so they're going to be doing a grand opening as well. So between Village, we might have a ribbon cutting on Ascent. I got to talk to the team. And then Zinnia, there will be several grand openings or ribbon cuttings coming that you'll all get invited to.
Where's the next one?
And that's it. I mean, for now, for the next quarter, through the end of the year, we still have, just because you closed doesn't mean no work is over. So there's still a lot of work for closing out the Village project and keeping tabs on construction for Ascent and making sure Zinnia is up and running smoothly. So that's still going to be a big focus for the next quarter. And then we've been talking about our pipeline and what are we going to start to focus on next. And I think that we've always had this 121 Main project we're trying to get early. We're looking at funding options now to try and keep that moving along if it can. And then probably bringing on a consultant here in the new year to start looking at conversion of the Parson Lodge out of the 202 program. Just the next 2 steps to take on. Any questions about development projects? We've got more projects coming when we talk about the federal funding down below, but development specifically.
Any questions? I so miss anybody here. Okay, I just input the Board of Commissioners.
So I'll take this first one as well, because it's just going to kind of lead into item B. So if you don't mind, I might just kind of go into both of them.
Yeah.
So on next Tuesday night, the LHAAB board will be considering accepting a grant from the city for $200,000 of CDBG funds to replace the doors at the suites. That sounds like a lot for doors, but it's actually super critical because one of our biggest challenges at the suites has been the fact that it was a hotel conversion and the doors cause a lot of problems for those with mental health struggles and just generally privacy and feeling safe. So they have giant gaps under them. They are hotel-sized doors, so they do not mean there is not a typical residential door that fits, so you have to do the whole frame and everything. And they automatically lock when you walk out. So we have more lockout problems at the suites than in the other property, which is a time sink and cost save on staff time as well. So between helping the residents feel safe and comfortable in their homes and reducing our operational costs, it was just a no-brainer. And luckily the city's CDBG grant this year did have capacity for that. So that's going to be considered by the board here next Tuesday.
So if I'm thinking of suites correctly, there's 3 doors that you have to go through, is that correct? Or are you replacing all 3 of those?
We're replacing all of the, not the glass sliders, but all of the unit entry doors and then like office and maintenance doors that are all the same currently. Do you remember how many doors it is? We have 82 units, so it's something like 100 doors.
And I think the way we want to pitch it is critical one are the unit doors. Those we have to replace. If the cost comes in after we do the RFP and there's more room in the budget to do additional doors, then we'll identify probably office doors for MHP staff, clinicians, and property management, and prioritize those. And then if there's still more budget after that, then the rest of the doors, because they're all the same. I don't want to spend all the money to replace doors that we don't need to if we have to focus primarily on units.
So that's the first item of federal funding here on this agenda with more to come. Is there any questions on that one specifically? Okay. We got something quick. I may the keyboard can sure, I'll just drive because I'm not scroll through it with drive stuff, so I'll just drive that.
Multitasking.
I'm a working mom, like I don't know if I've ever done one thing in the last 6 years. Playing with it. This is going to be on our SharePoint, which this computer won't be able to access. So, without going through Microsoft 365, which I'm not really excited to try.
Can you just join on your computer and share your screen?
Yes, much better. Okay. So, we have talked about this a bit in the past, but we have from 2021 or so and now, when the city received its ARPA funding allocation and CDBG CV, which is COVID money allocation, we've been working to use that money. So on the ARPA side, I'll share first. So this is a work in progress, but this is where we are right now. And I'm definitely gonna have to zoom in. It's too big even. To see that. Okay, so on the ARPA side, this is what City Council dedicated towards affordable housing. It was, the number was originally $8.85 million. I'm see the notes right now, so I'll just get even bigger. And so this is how, between LHA and the city, because this all really went through the city for it. So anything on here that's an LHA project went through an IGA from the city to LHA. But LHA was a major player here. So this is, everything in yellow is how we have spent the $8.85 million of ARPA funds. And then, as we got later down the road, and other groups that received ARPA allocations, either conditions changed or they had trouble spending the money, we have been the final bucket that can spend the money, because we have a lot of need. And so these are all of the properties that have been served by ARPA funds. And then down at the bottom, once we started to swoop in additional funds, this is what this is ending up looking like. So everything in yellow is spent. I'll go over a couple of anomalies up here first. So this was a loan. So we loaned MGL the securities through LHAAB, the public improvement securities for construction. They will pay that back once they've received construction acceptance from the city. And so we've already gotten $65,000 of that back, but the rest will come next year. And so that is all, as it gets paid back, is dumping into this bucket right here, which is ARPA staffing, which is how we've paid for Katie Kung, our development project manager. So that will dump back into that bucket to pay for her through 2025. And then, so
How much is left in that?
I'm sorry? How much is left?
You and I didn't talk about that. How much is left with Katie in that?
We have been running the projections to make sure there's enough to get through 25. So it should be something like October, it should be something on the order of 130,
Okay.
something. We've been running periodic projections to make sure we're on track. And either way, if we do run out, we've got her.
Yeah, it's budgeted, yeah.
Okay, and then this was our first, I should mention these two. These two were projects that we had in mind when we first discussed receiving this funding. The Next Light bulk agreements was something that we wanted to do at LHA to give all residents access to Next Light for free, but then the federal government came in on the broadband side and ended up with a program that did functionally the same thing, so we held off on that. That is something we would still like to do in the future, but there is a cost associated, so we would need to figure out a funding source. But that program is either still going or has just recently ended.
I think it's ended.
But
But some companies are still continuing that honoring.
yes, and even so, if you live in our properties, you qualify for there are other programs through Longmont that help, and so you can get Next Light still for something like $16 a month.
Yeah, Next Light's still doing it. We're mimicking the federal program. We're just doing it internally, but we think there's more money coming, so that's good.
Yeah, so we're keeping tabs. The unhoused project, this one was a real challenging one. We knew that we wanted originally to fund about $1.5 million into a project that served the unhoused. We didn't know if that looked like something in the area of sheltering or housing or something creative in between. In the end, that is a really complex problem to solve, and the time constraints on the money did not help there. And then plus we ended up putting money into Zinnia, which did serve the similar population that we were trying to serve here. And because the opportunity came up to do an affordable home ownership on the city side, that is a rare opportunity, and so the council made the decision to go ahead and swap that for now. Still, obviously, keeping tabs on unhoused and how we can best serve them. Okay, so here's what the upcoming swoop that we anticipate to be able to spend this money. Really what it is all this money has to be obligated, which is kind of like contracted in the simplest term, by the end of this year in order to keep it. So we are the ones that can contract this, partially because we can do an IGA with LHA, and that also is considered obligated. And so we're swooping more funds. And so what we're working with here, this is all the ADA improvements that we did. We actually, in this phase one of LHA accessibility, this came out of the voluntary compliance agreement and the massive report of ADA corrections that we have to complete in the next 7 years. Well, I should say 6 now, we've been through one. So we did a lot of work with that one, but we still have work to do. So we're continuing that. This is primarily right now asphalt work to redo ADA parking spaces or trip hazards, and then concrete work to do new ADA ramps and trip hazards. And concrete is expensive. So right now I'm working with a couple of contractors to get bids. I'm working this in conjunction with about $5,000 of additional CME funds that's going to also help with the asphalt and concrete work. And then we still have more we could do if the funding came out. So working to get that all squared away so that we can have everything contracted by the end of the year. The final CV amount that we used is also on the order of $140,000, but I'll double check that number. But so it's all pairing together. In the end, it's going to be $250,000 worth of ADA improvements that we've done between the two funding sources. LHA cameras, this is something we've been working on for 2 years to get our security cameras all onto one integrated system. We're again using $83,000 of regular CDBG money in conjunction with ARPA funds to get these cameras going. It's also a $250,000 project to get the equipment, the licensing, the install, and then we'll have to keep up with them long-term maintenance.
That's your question.
Yeah.
In-house, what's our focus on housing authority?
So the housing authority's role is more in creating and managing the housing. So permanent supportive housing is often the first step out of being unhoused, and so running the suites in Zinnia is the primary focus of LHA. On the city side, a lot of unhoused work regarding coordinated entry out into housing, whether it's through LHA or elsewhere, and providing services, all comes from the Human Services Department. Ellie Berko and Christina's work.
Is there a homeless program that exists in Longmont, or is it just spread out over different functions?
So what are you, it's kind of a difficult question to answer. So as a county, we all operate under coordinated entry. And so that's a very defined program of which there are multiple groups that work with that program. And so that's a piece of it. And then in terms of nonprofit support, that's where Hope slides in. And so that's a piece of it where they're operating L there for us, but then we also have people in the public safety department that have been repurposed where they work in conjunction with them. But all of that funnels itself into coordinated entry. Then once they get into coordinated entry, that's when we start moving people on the road of housing. And so I think helping that group of house, what, 80?
In the last year,
Yeah,
I think between 70 and 80.
between 70 and 80 people have been housed. So there's not a singular group that does it. It is multiple groups that are contributing into the coordinated entry process.
Is there any group that presents statistics on homelessness, like what makes it up? As an example, how many people want to be homeless, how many people are, drug addicted. And when I say want to be homeless, I don't believe anybody wants to be homeless. I believe some people say that when they're afraid to go coordinate housing stuff. But is there anybody that coordinates? If I wanted a picture of homelessness, where would I go?
So we're actually, public safety right now is gathering that data. It's different than a point in time survey. So the county does a point in time survey where everyone goes out and asks some questions. But we, as public safety, our chief wanted more information as far as, what resources are you using? What else do you need? So we're really diving into that. And I think that data collection will end at the end of this month. And then I'm assuming the chief will be presenting that to the council, or some of the information will get out somehow.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it with the data, so you have to do a point in time survey because it's really what HUD requires. The data they're doing is going to be an ongoing collection of data as they're interacting with people. The thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that it's always changing. In that what we see what we're seeing now is not what we'll see in December, and it's not what we're going to see in March. Because I think when we look at who the individuals we're housing, so typically those individuals that get housed are people that are the unhoused individuals that aren't the people that you see. So it's people that are living in their cars. In some cases, it's people that you're seeing, but they may be camping, but actually working and doing other things because, when you get into, I think the group that you're probably talking about is a group that we see, that is a completely different set of issues that we're starting to tease out that we're challenged with. And, most of that is rooted into a couple of things. One, mental health and substance abuse. And I think in some of those cases, they're hand in hand, but substance abuse is probably the most prolific issue we have. And to give you an example of some of the challenges, the substance abuse is so significant that until there is a treatment component, most are choosing to remain unhoused because they don't want to stop utilizing illegal substances. Even to the point where we've had individuals who have had very significant health conditions. And I don't even know if the guy's still around or not.
Jack,
Yeah.
he's actually in Boulder with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
She's housed.
That's why they had the heart attack.
No, this is a different guy.
In his van.
No, this is a different guy, but the issue that we were really dealing with is, so like if you're using methamphetamine that has iodine in it, then it's a flesh-eating piece, and so individual, for example, that literally have that going on with more chronic issues, maggots and things, right? Repeatedly tried to get into the hospital, but repeatedly denied, didn't give us the ability to do that. And the reason was because they couldn't get fentanyl. And so, you've heard me use the onion analogy. It really is layers and layers and layers in terms of what you're dealing with. But, in many cases, what you'll see is police, lead corps, some version of that group working with it. And so they have a meeting where they get together, Hope gets together, all the folks are talking, so it's really this interconnected web. But it's hard for us to give you a singular answer to say why, because it really is dependent on these different levels. But if we had to say, why don't people want to be housed, we are seeing in the data that there's some that just want to remain unhoused. I think it's driven by drugs, but
I don't have any hidden agenda.
Yeah, no.
Every Friday, I'm part of the problem that pushes people in homelessness.
Right.
So the longer I'm doing this, the more I'm getting interested in
No, I don't.
what happens once I push them out the door.
No, this is just an opportunity for us to talk about it. That's why I'm kind of digging in a little bit. And you're right. I mean, and typically what do you see when you're on the eviction side, at least from the housing authority perspective? Our evictions tend to always be related to behavior or drugs. And, the challenge with that is when you have people living in these facilities, first and foremost, you have to look at the health, safety, and welfare of all the residents in the units. And so it is troubling when you have to come in and you house someone and a month later you have to evict them, because that's happened to us. Or 6 months later, you have to evict them, but you can't let the behaviors continue to where it's now creating problems with other individuals. And especially when you have individuals that are in recovery. And we had some issues at the suites, what was that, Sarah, about 2 or 3 years ago? Where the individual was dealing.
Oh, yeah.
So when you have people that are in recovery, and you have somebody that's in the facility that then starts trying to deal now all of a sudden, they're not just destabilizing themselves, they're destabilizing others. And so, yeah. So that's a nutshell of what we're doing. But we can talk 3 hours of this.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I never thought about it until I saw it up here. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't intend to bring it up to this meeting until I saw that. I was just curious if you comment for doing.
So on this that Molly's presenting, so a few things that we had to do, and the reason why I asked the question about the staffing. So Molly talked about how we have to get contracts in place, because if you don't have contracts, you can't pull the money over if you don't spend it. Part of the broader ARPA funding that we used, we created positions to try to get at some of the issues, specifically like in neighborhoods. So we created what are those positions? Somebody remember it, neighborhood outreach. One was in Emily's group that was.
That was Alejandro, and then he moved into permanent.
But
It's basically case management and outreach.
The challenge that we're having there is that some of those positions, so when we built it in terms of, it was like a 4 or 5 year term position, which is more, people tend to want to go into this. Well, what started happening is, what we're finding in our staffing challenges generally, someone would start working for us and we would pay $28 an hour. Well, then they would use it in the experience, which would be good on them to then leverage getting a higher level position or moving into a permanent position if we had it. So what we started seeing, what Peter started seeing as we were approaching this is, if there was an area where we were really concerned about having to send money back to the feds because we weren't using it, it's because we would have vacancies in these positions. And if you don't have it set up to sweep the money over, then it just goes back. So we did a few things. We ended up taking the interest earnings that we've been making on the funds that have just been in the bank. You have more flexibility with the interest that you're making on it. So I actually flipped the funding on the positions. So I moved the interest over to fund the positions. I moved the actual ARPA dollars over to fund these projects. Now, I am having meetings, so that you see the $6,000 placeholder, it literally is just a placeholder. We had to put some money in an account to fund it so that then after the end of the year, if we have other money, we can pull it in. Globally, I'm going to start I've got a meeting set up at some point with all of these folks to look at the staffing and whether or not we realistically think we're going to be able to fill the positions. Because now we're in a two-year window for those positions. And so every month that goes by, the likelihood of filling it goes down because people don't want a two-year term position. So what we'll do is we're going to make some decisions on those positions, and then as we're making those decisions, if we have excess funds, we're going to drive it down into either the accessibility piece, which is the parking lots and sidewalks, or we're going to push it into the unit plans.
You say the money goes back.
To the federal government.
Does it also result in a decrease from this year?
No, because this is COVID relief funds, but does it impact how they look at other significant events in the future potentially? So the more efficient and effective you are at using your dollars, if you have another disaster or something that comes in, the more they're going to say, yeah, this group can spend the money, meet the requirements, and accomplish what we want to accomplish with this. And we do know that if there's lingering effects still from COVID, it really is in the affordable housing world. We're still seeing issues. And part of that was because what you're also seeing in the rental assistance program, why I think affordable housing is so important as you're coming out of COVID, is they pushed a lot of money out for rental assistance. What's happening as that money goes away, you know, I think thinking through it, we probably could have done something a little bit different, because what you wanted is stabilizing COVID and then have people wean themselves off of the rental assistance. The reality is they didn't. And you're probably seeing it, and then people are getting evicted because they just got accustomed to the rental assistance and never wean themselves off, and now there's not money available. So when you take all of this in play, these things about building more units and you know, improving the units is incredibly important, because we don't need the units now, we need them up so that we can house individuals that are caught in this situation. So it's a bit maddening, but I think we're set up now.
So Harold, do you see us having a problem here, like California is with LHAAB hitting their 30-year mark, and places are going to market instead of affordable?
So a lot of our properties have a right covenant that runs with the land forever.
Yeah,
There's a
so
lot of affordable covenants that keep it affordable in perpetuity.
see, it depends on
LHA will continue to buy it from itself.
Yeah.
It's more like private affordable housing developers that
that's-
want to do it one time.
Yeah,
So it depends, right? So when we invest money in affordable housing, whether it's through the Affordable Housing Fund, those covenants are in perpetuity. And so even if we're not the owner, but you're the owner and you do it, you would have to buy out of that covenant if you wanted to take it to market rates. You know, I think what we're seeing on the West Coast is, and I think we're going to see that it's more than just California, is what they were doing is facilitating these LHAAB deals, but they didn't have the covenants on the backside, or they didn't have first right of refusals. And so now they're caught in that trap of, okay, I've done what I need to do, I'm converting it into market rate, because they didn't have these other parameters in the contract.
Whenever we do a special limited partnership, we include that in the contract
All right,
to some level.
I can't think of one that we've done, because most of them took affordable housing funds.
Yeah,
Which
so
is the other
we've
part.
there was a gap in time. So LHA did a lot of SLPs in history, but I would say I don't know how many years to call it, let's say 5 to 10 years before the city came in, affordable housing projects did come into Longmont and did not use LHA as an SLP. But they did access the city's affordable housing funds, which we did add a layer of protection there. We have had two developers of two owners of existing affordable housing come to us now and ask for that SLP relationship now. So that's something that is an ongoing potential, and at that point we could negotiate something like that. But also those deals are done, so we have to see what is already built in for that too. But
And they can't make it pass on, so they're coming back and asking for taxes.
Yeah.
So what we didn't go into is what is the unit turns contract. Because of our staffing shortage on the maintenance side and just the last, the turmoil that we've had in the last year in terms of getting, making sure that we have stable staff, and we had meth units, which is not just this year thing, it's actually been lower than average this year. But just with what is going on, we do not want to reach the end of the year and have vacancies that should be filled. And so that serves the purpose of affordable housing, to get these units ready to go when LHA doesn't have the resources to do so otherwise. So we're working on procuring an on-call contract for janitorial and maintenance for things like if we have to redo flooring to get a unit turned. Because we have a number of units that are needing this now, and we want them done by the end of the year.
Yeah,
So that's something that we can put in.
So this is taking it away from maintenance then, and this person or persons
Yes.
would go in and clean it.
On an
That's
estimate
perpetuity.
basis. Right.
So this is a catch-up. I do think the custodial piece, like we talked about, is probably something that makes more sense for us to look at on an ongoing basis. The maintenance is going to be unit specific in terms of what we're doing. We also are adding, as I said, a maintenance person, so we're going to assess what the ROI is on projects. I think that's something we need to do going into it, is what's the value of time versus money, and then on Kendra's side, rent. Because we could save $15,000 and it takes us 9 months to do, or we could lose the rent, which is, we've got to start doing that evaluation and determining who the right group to do unit turns.
So that was what came up last time, so how fast can we turn them?
Yeah, this is a follow-up to the conversation we had at the last meeting. We were able to figure out the funding.
How is the waiting list for these projects?
I would have to pull that. We refresh the waiting list as soon as they get stale or too short. But do you have any examples off the top of our head of what one of the wait lists looks like right now?
Some of them
Parsonage Lodge is always the longest.
There are probably like 50, 60 people did at all times.
So do you have people assigned these units or?
No. So when it comes to the unit turns and people vacating, it's kind of a chicken and egg game of who's ready first. My philosophy and what I tell the staff is in a perfect scenario when you're fully staffed in your capacity, unit turns should be happening as soon as you know there's a vacancy coming. And the person vacates the unit, you should be getting that unit ready because you don't know how quickly someone from the wait list is going to come up. Some people take a couple days to respond. They might have to get more paperwork. The application process can take a week. So you don't want one only waiting on the other. And that's what was happening in the past, was there was a lack of communication between the property management and the maintenance. And the property manager was telling maintenance, oh, you don't need to turn the unit, we don't have anybody yet. But then they would get someone, and then that person would have to wait a week or two for the unit to be ready. So we want to avoid that and have them both simultaneously working, getting people assigned and through the application process while the unit is being turned and made ready quickly. Because we're losing money, and I actually added that into the operations report this time to show how big of a need this is. And this is a continuation of an ongoing issue that only was made worse by Lisa vacating, and now we have this maintenance. And I can't say more in detail about some of that, but there were good changes, but it's painful in the process.
The Zinnia Tenant Damages Fund, that's something that we're funding out of our interest, that non-federalized money. But this, you'll hear more about this in November because we'll have an IGA coming for consideration in November. So we'll bring that back to dig in a little bit more, but that's also in the mix. So in total, we will end up spending, assuming we are able to swoop all of this, which is the hope, between all of the COVID-related money, we will be spending, in my window, almost $9.4 million on affordable housing. From the first expenditure was, I think Christmas is the first one we put through. Well, we did do the Mustang one later. Either way, since 2022. So in about 3 years, 2022, 23, 24, we'll have spent about $9.4 million, which is awesome. So I'll be presenting this to the LHA board as well because we have to get some budget authorizations to enter into some of these contracts while the IGAs are still in progress. So that's all coming together. It's kind of work in progress this week.
Is that next week?
Yeah, next Tuesday. For sharing. That's item 8N. Okay.
No, I'm assuming Jennifer that this is your.
Yeah.
Or Hodge.
Oh, wow.
It's the,
Josh has lost audio.
Josh is what?
Josh says he's lost audio.
Oh,
Hey, I got you guys back. I just lost you right there at the tail end.
Really quite good topic.
So budget, 2025 budget. There's still some things coming in. Some things may change by next week, just developer fees that are changing, just because of how they're projected, but then that's not how they end up coming through. So what I have projected last year has changed. So there's a couple numbers that I've updated for LHA based on when developer fees are expected to come in now. But other than that, some of the challenges, and these are going to be the same challenges we have every year, which is revenue uncertainty. We have the HCD vouchers, those are portable. We did decide to kind of take a portion of those HCD vouchers and budget against them, because what we were seeing is some properties, and I'm going to use Spring Creek as an example, they have like 19 HCD vouchers. So if we don't budget a little portion of that, even though it's coming in, and we could have expenditures that they can use for just everyday use, landscaping, that type of stuff, we wanted to try and budget a little so that it's ready and available. So we did do that. Developer fees, that's also dependent on cash flow. Again, those are the numbers that are changing because based on cash flow of these properties, the developer fees change on when they actually get paid out or when they can't get paid out. We have the projected schedule, but that's not necessarily how it ends up falling. And so that's updated every year. We have inflationary costs, we're seeing those across the board. That could be insurance. Insurance was probably a 12% increase. We have benefits that are coming through that are health insurance is another 12% increase. So as far as benefits, and we're also moving, normally we budget at 101% of market for our employees, but we're only budgeting at 100% this year because we just can't. With the benefits increase and insurance increase, we just can't go up to that level this year. So for the Hearthstone and Lodge, they have been submitted to HUD. The Lodge has an increase of 4.27, and the Hearthstone is an increase of 5.15. They did come back, so we send it, and then they come back and they'll tell us, like, okay, no, we're not going to fund this. Last year, they decided that certain things that you would think are preventative maintenance or things that you would normally have on an annual basis, like carpet cleaning, they took out of the budget and said we had to submit those through our replacement reserves. So there's certain things that they're taking out to accommodate what they can increase. And we did get pretty upfronted in 2022 and 2023. They gave us more than usual. Usually the expected increase is 4 to 5%. That HUD will allow, so we try to keep within those limits because we didn't get our contracts until like May of 2024. And the Lodge contract expires in December and the Hearthstone expires in January. So LHA was upfronting money until we could actually get that contract and get the additional.
So for these two, this is not actual increases on their people's rent, right?
Correct. For this one, it's basically 30% or 50% of their income. And so unless their income changes, that's when they see their increase. Same with the suites. The suites is 100% PPP vouchers. Because we are in a shortfall, we are not requesting an increase in those voucher to fair market rents. So we are keeping the studio apartment 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms at the same that were approved last year. And the same. These individuals aren't affected unless their income changes. So the Zinnia rates right now, those are voucher rates, and they were projected at $1,675. So that's what, and same thing, they're fully funded by state vouchers, not federal vouchers. And so that's the same situation. Tenants will only pay what their allotted income is based on the tax credit, which I think those are all the same. Somebody have any questions on that?
The one thing I would point out on Zinnia, where we have to think about it in a slightly different way, is that we're not in the ownership structure. So we're contracted property management. So on that side, you know, if there are issues with meth contamination and things like that, those are not necessarily issues that we have to worry about, and we'll bear that. That's the owner. And so there's just a nuance to Zinnia that I wanted to make you all aware of, and in that it really is a contractual relationship where they pay us to do certain things. We don't necessarily, in this case, have that broader exposure.
Do you ever think you will own it through LHAAB?
Pardon?
Do you ever think you will own the property through LHAAB?
They've openly talked about wanting to sell it to us. You know, I think there's some things that we need to be careful and think through based on some of the requirements that are on the property and how we need to approach it, and some liability issues that we need to be very careful with. But yeah, they talked about wanting to sell it.
So for the rest of our properties, we are going to do a 5% rental increase. Now realize that is, it could, you know, that's the maximum. So maximum would be 5% increase. But if they're already at close to the tax credit rent, and the tax credit rent only increases 3%, then that will be their increase, because we can't go over that one. So it all depends on where they fall. You know, if they were brought in under the tax credit, they might see the 5% increase. And then notice to tenants will be going out after budget approval.
And those, so, is it just something that's affecting you personally? Just on.
Well, the notice kind of, I think, is kind of twofold, because you can't separate the voucher individuals from regular tenants because they post this. So it'll be not only, if you're not voucher funded, right, your outcome's different because it's only based on your income. If your income increases, your rent increases.
I'm saying,
So,
the notice is a general notice that this is happening.
yes.
It's not an individual
Correct.
notice.
No.
They'll get the individual notice at their recent appointment.
No, so typically what we do in that case is I will go to coffee, I don't know.
In November.
Get the schedule. But once we do this, we'll get the notice out, and I go to coffee conversations. Kendra will join me and we'll say, so here's what's gonna happen, here's what's driving the rental increase, and it's everything we told you, inflation, you know, basic things. And then we're really pointed, because we do get into those conversations.
Yeah.
And it's, you need to make the appointment, you know, with, you know, it'll happen during recertification. If you have a recertification coming up, make the appointment as soon as possible so you can figure out if it's later in the year and you're concerned about it. Schedule an appointment with the property manager so you can go over those issues, because there's no way we could do it individually with all of the nuances. Yeah. We found that works fairly well.
So for our vouchers, we're currently in a shortfall. We have a meeting with HUD on Thursday to go over that shortfall to see if we can get additional funding. Right now, what we're expected to bring to the board is for those that are currently at the fair market rents that were instituted in 2024. So these below ones, the 1585, 1823. If they are currently already at that rate, they'll just be frozen. They would be able to request an increase. I mean, they could request one, but we would have to deny it. And then for 2025, we would actually institute the 2025s for those that are not at that level yet. Because we have about 200 plus vouchers currently that are under the 2025 expected fair market rents. And so to help protect ourselves from getting an additional $1 million shortfall next year, we want to make sure that those individuals only go up to the 2025 rates. So that's what we're proposing. We're also going to talk it through with climate on Thursday. Because we'll be in another conversation with HUD next year. Because it's about, the numbers are about, if we stayed at the 2024 rates for all of our vouchers, and every single landlord went up to the fair market rent, it would be another $100,000 per month, per year. So it's another $1 million that could happen. Now, that's obviously staggered based on when their recertifications are due, but we want to be more conservative, which if we go with a conservative approach, it would be $67,000 per month per year increase.
So landlords aren't going to get if you have voucher holders, you're not going to get a reduction in the tenant. You just might not be able to raise the rent the next year.
Right. Or you could raise it to a lot of
Right,
others. Yeah. Or you could get it to the 2025 rate if you're not there already. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they could technically raise it what they need to raise it. This is all we're gonna pay.
Yeah.
Like ask for whatever you want,
The
right?
individual then has to make up that difference.
Yeah. The tenant would have to make a difference. We just didn't want to do that for the ones that have already reached the 2025 to have the bigger cost. And according to HUD, that's not allowed. You have to actually give every year's notice to those individuals to give them time to do that for the reduction. So
we've had one conversation with HUD. I think we learned a lot in that conversation. And the margins are really fine on this. You know, I think some groups play a little too, and this is broader housing authorities, will play a little bit too fast and loose with this, and because if you go into shortfall and they fund it, then you get that number the following year. And I think some are more intentional about being a shortfall. And so what that does is that's how they're getting more money. The challenge with it, and I think this year is, pretty important to watch this, is that, that is dependent on the budget being approved at the federal level. And so we've all seen the continuing appropriation saga. And so if you're playing that game, it could bite you if they don't fund it. Now, what we did is just actually utilize our vouchers. And then we got in a period of, just incredible inflation in rental costs and a lack of units. And so I think it's a better story in what we're saying, but that's what you have to watch. I think the other thing is, they give you this number of 4% that you need to stay at. I think we've been treating the 4% as sort of a floor in terms of reserves. Well, it's interesting because if you're over 4%, they can sweep your reserves. And so the more you listen to them, it's almost like Kendra and I have been talking about this. Do we want to set a 2.5%, 3% reserves to avoid the potential sweep? Because the way they fund those that are in our situation they're sweeping money from other people who aren't using it. So for years, I guess what's been happening to us is when we weren't using that money, I was sweeping it and moving it to other housing authorities, but we didn't really know that. So it's been an interesting learning experience.
And that's why they have a 2-year tool. Because in 1 month, and actually it's kind of a 3-year tool if you look at it, but in 1 month, you can go to being at 4% and go down to 2%.
Yeah.
Just with, depending on how many vouchers you have in that month, and a lot of them try to time their vouchers so that you have a steady amount of voucher recertifications each month. You don't have a huge jump. But when you add PPP vouchers, you will have that huge jump if all those individuals stay in those units for the next year. So other new items in 2025, we'll be adding a new accounting position. And partly because we're all over exceeded in our workload right now, but we also want to be able to do and maintain our separation duties. I also feel that in the accounting department, we need to provide additional reports that data mine what's happening on the financial side, and we just haven't had the bandwidth to do that. But this position would also be providing those reports, more detailed data coming through the system for operational purposes and management purposes. We are going to do an admin position to support Village on Briarwood and have Patrick be more of a supervisor role so that he can tackle that and make sure somebody is managing and supervising the unit terms and he's not having his own unit terms in the process. So we were able to do that. Budget increases and decreases, we have a 12% net increase in benefits. And then with that, we have to bring the salaries at 100% rate.
Is that going to cause a problem with hiring people where we've gone to 100%, so 100 and what?
No, because most everybody is still getting an increase. So it's not like freezing them. So most of them are still getting an increase of 100%. I mean, most places are probably at 100%. And we seem to be pretty fair with what we looked at in the market. Because we tend to look at other positions that are in the market, and we seem to be right there or even higher.
We did an effort this whole last year to benchmark all the positions and make sure everything is pretty aligned to market right now based on the data that we have. So I'm pretty confident that we've got our salaries well aligned and even with the 101 to 100, because the benchmark moves, that they would generally be getting some level of increase on the most part.
And even with this, we do budget an exceptional pay increase too, in case that is warranted throughout the year. So we do budget that on top of the 100%. So there is some cushion if we feel like somebody has went over the job duties.
So part of what's in this, so we did this in conjunction with the city's position. So what the thing it's telling us is we're assuming a 3% adjustment to the range in market, which moves the midpoint 3%. So if there's someone that wouldn't get an increase, it's someone that may have been, let's say they were at 103% because of exceptional pay, and they didn't get exceptional pay this year, then they would be relatively flat. But that's just the general movement. We do benchmark these positions individually, and we saw a lot of movement in the benchmarks. So when we say 3%, that's like the minimum movement. In many cases, what we're finding are positions are moving 5%, 7% because of the market itself.
Your accounting position, is that, if I ask this question, do you have the the tools to generate the kind of stuff we're talking about generating, or is this a position because it's still a lot of man?
No, I mean, we have, so the problem is we have added additional properties, we've added some city properties, we've added Zinnia, and Ascent is coming on board. Like most of, like my accountant right now is pretty strapped to get all of the financials prepped and over for me to review the deadlines that they get. Yeah, so it's workload, it's the number of payables that are gonna be coming in the door. It's the number of death reps we have on each one of these properties, which is anywhere from 3 to 4 different bank reps for each property. So it's just, it's come to a point where we're just overloaded.
That makes sense, but I think my question is still valid. Are there more tools that you could use that would help manage this that you don't have?
Well, we just had a Yardi training this last week and found out there's a lot of tools that were never built in our system. And this is just not for accounting, it's also for the property managers. So I do think, I mean, obviously bad data in is bad data out. And so there's probably going to be some learning curve in the beginning to make sure that the data that we're producing out of Yardi is correct and true. But there is so much that was never set up for us. The property managers have to do everything manually, from the lease to the letters to the wait list. Their wait list right now is currently an Excel spreadsheet, so they're not utilizing the system like they could. And there was a lot of ooh and ah moments. It was like watching fireworks sometimes, just finding the shortcuts, the shortcuts to ease their daily job. To be able to produce reports and build reports. If you need a list of tenants and their phone numbers, a lot of them didn't have the ability for having a manual process of doing that on the side.
So do you manage that, or is that managed by an IT department?
Oh no, I'm IT too.
For Yardi.
Yeah, I'm IT for Yardi. But what I would say is that bringing the groups together made a huge difference. Like, on their abilities, what they can do in the system. We are currently in the process of doing implementation for 2 packages, which is, we didn't know it was 2 different implementations, but it's Rent Cafe. So that will be both on the voucher side. So that one has already started. The affordable side will start here soon. But it's 2 different implementation teams to actually, so tenants will be able to do reports. They'll be able to pay all through a portal system and do their research online, upload documentation, a more streamlined approach. But we're also building it so that community managers can also assist those, because we do have an elderly population that they may need assistance. So, sometimes it's just reading stuff on the computer, right? It's not as like even for me, it's not big enough sometimes. But we are building it so that that's not the only way they can do research, or the only way that the community managers can assist as well.
So these pieces of the system that haven't been set up, is that something your department would have to do, or is that something you have to pay Yardi to do?
Well, currently we already paid Yardi to implement this package, and it's basically just we're getting it set up right now. So they're going through testing periods. They set certain pieces up. It's a huge project, especially on the voucher side. It's going to take about 6 months to get it implemented, because there's so many different pieces that have to go through. And then the other thing that will be nice is that people will be able to log on and actually add themselves to a list.
So part of it, this is sort of the Yardi hangover that we can't seem to get over. And when the Housing Authority purchased Yardi and they transitioned, if you remember, they didn't move records over. They were still working in the old system, sort of doing both. They basically bought the Lamborghini of systems, but they implemented the
Corolla.
Corolla version of the system. So the reality is the tools are there. They've never been triggered to be utilized, and as we were sliding in, we never had the staff to fully engage in it. So part of, I think, what we can get out of adding the accounting position is that if we can manage the workload, then those positions can work with Kendra so that we are more able to utilize the tools and do things internally. So part of it is we pay for things the collective we, over time, pay for things that are not being utilized.
Can they just be turned on or does it require?
Some of it is like just them uploading the package. Some of it is, I just don't think we have some breaks in the system. So their IT's gonna have to get involved. You should be able to hit the help button and it pulls up exactly all the help you need to toggle through that screen, and all we do is a picture. So just little nuances. They didn't set up any letters on the affordable side. So I mean, it's producing those letters, it's getting those letters uploaded, and there's apparently a tool that we can upload it if we change that. So
I have one more question on the next topic that was on that topic. Do you run that system, or is it remotely run from?
I do not know. This is
Cloud-based.
yeah, it's a cloud-based.
Cloud-based.
It's a cloud-based
So
system.
it's scalable.
Yeah.
Okay, so in order to end on time, let's keep going. So can I ask just a couple of beginning questions before you actually get into this?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain to me again what tenant services is?
So tenant services can be different things at different properties. So what you're probably seeing at most of these properties is LHA last year took their resource specialist who was at Hearthstone, the Lodge, and the Suites, and transitioned that individual because their background wasn't the best for the Suites population. We needed more of a clinician at those. So LHA paid for the resource specialists they come to the properties. 4 hours a week, I think, a man. Yeah, that's what he owned. And so what we were able to do this year is bring that down to the property level so that LHA could hire the maintenance, hire the accounting, and absorb what they needed to absorb based on the increases. So that's what you're seeing on most of these properties, is that sometimes for the suites, it could be, we also provided the suites. Telephone, internet. So that's fully paid for all of the tenants of the suites, and that'll fall in tenant services. For the Hearthstone and Lodge, they have the pendant system, and that's a requirement for those properties. They used to have pull cord, but we went to a pendant system, so that you'll see in tenant services. And then what also is in tenant services is if there's a budget for tenant activities and services. So that's what kind of sums up those. So you'll also see that here too.
Okay. So then the other thing was, I noticed that in some of them we have a MEF reserve and some of them we don't.
Yes, because that was based on budget. So it's not a requirement for these properties to have a MEF reserve. We started that a couple years ago. But this year,
Okay.
there was more needs at the property after meeting with community managers and the maintenance team, that between landscaping and equipment and stuff like that, it just didn't fit in the budget. So we added them where I added them where I could, and realized anything that's below the line, I mean, obviously, developer fees based on cash flow, reserve replacement is required, and so is any type of mortgage. We need to make sure we can pay for those. But in the end, if we can't fund the $10,000 or $5,000 in that, then we can't do that. But it's in the budget to hopefully do that. But you never know what's going to happen at these properties. So I don't know if you want to go through all of these, or if you just, so what this does is, it's for revenue purposes, it's gonna tell you what you're budgeting for revenue, but down here at the bottom in the revenue section, it'll let you know how many HCD vouchers we have and what is possible to also come in via revenue that we haven't budgeted. So to give you just to give you an idea of that. I don't know if you guys want to go detail, or do you guys have any questions on this, or any questions on any properties?
Well, I kind of went through it and got my calculator out and figured out how you came up with these, because I couldn't do it in my head.
Yeah, so behind this, there's a multi-tabbed, hundreds of line spreadsheets of where they're then broken down by properties. And so we didn't figure, I mean, it's just a lot of information, so we're rolling everything up to present to you all. I think the big piece, again, for those that weren't here until we took over, there were a lot of properties that were budgeting in the negative. And so, obviously, you can see some of these are doing well. I mean, everything's in positive in terms of what we're looking at. I think, yeah.
Yeah. We'll go straight to the LHA general fund if nobody has any questions property wise.
Well, I guess one question has come up at several different places is the event fund. Yeah.
It's not changing, so.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so it didn't,
That's kind of
I
what I
didn't
told her.
increase it, but it didn't increase either.
We gotta have the cards.
So we kind of did something a little different this year, and that is taking the developer fee revenue and then also adding a developer fee expense, so you can kind of see exactly what of our general fund we're using, and how it changes from year to year as you add properties and get living management fees. So in 2025, our recurring revenue consists of management fees and snow removal. In 2024, we did also have $150,000 from LHTC, that's a corporate management fee. But they're going more to a structure of providing assistance at the Hearthstone and the Lodge properties, which are theirs, that they're assisting in amounts that could not get funded by HUD. So even though we lost that, we still didn't lose too much because we added Zidian to our portfolio and are getting management fees from that. So in this year, we're probably going to be using about $888,000 from our general fund. Last year, we also had the resource specialist that was allocated at LHA. We were able to move that to the property level. We were also paying for some of the speed security and the patrols. The patrols are going to be changing to more of a camera monitoring focus, but we were able to get the full security contract back down to the speeds as well.
So, I mean, the story in this is that last year, if you look at the fund balance needed at 905, and then you look at the fund balance needed at 888. Remember, that's related to developer fees, and we talked about wanting a more sustainable revenue source. So the interesting piece is so it decreased in what we're pulling out of the fund balance based on what we're projecting. Balance that with the fact that we've added 2 positions and made all the adjustments that Kendra's talking about. So, you know, we've added operationally a couple of $100,000 in expenses, but we're drawing less out of fund balance. And that's because of the revenue structures coming in from bringing the properties with those ongoing revenue sources. And so that's really the big takeaway from this, is that we're still trending in the right direction in terms of having sustainable ongoing funding sources and not relying solely on the developer fees for ongoing expenses.
And then LHAAB, the difference here is a lot of what they were paying was $150,000 corporate management fee, which was really built for the development purpose. And since we're kind of changing their platform from less development, and that's on the LHA side, they're going to be contributing just mainly to Hearthstone and the Lodge. And mainly positions. It's the positions that don't get fully funded at those properties based on the market and what it is.
Okay.
Did you have a fund balance sheet, Kendra?
I did not when I did this.
Can you
Last
pull that-
Friday, but I have it now.
Can you pull that up?
Yeah.
You need to share it with them.
So this is our fund balance. Realize these numbers won't really tie back to your individual projects because this is looked at as LHA consolidated in a whole. So that includes the Briarwood office, the Briarwood apartments, those entities that fall into this platform. We are looking at possibly a starting balance in 2025. That's just an estimated balance. Then it'll kind of go through what our developers' fees, and this is obviously the number that's changed. What we're actually getting on management fees for current properties, what rental revenue we're getting in from Briarwood, the snow removal, and then, just a plug for a little weather. And then these are what is happening expenditure-wise on all of those properties. So if you were to tie these numbers back to the individual properties, you would have to add those together to come up with these numbers. And then it's just kind of scaling that out currently at a 3% inflation rate to kind of get an idea of where our fund balance will be. Now, the Ascent developer fees are now included in here. Last year we had them down in this little red because it was a future event that hadn't closed yet. Now that it's closed and we have kind of a documented source that I can project off of. Those have moved up, but our management fees won't happen until closer to the end of 2025. So that's what we're projecting here, and then this would be our adjusted new fund balance. What Harold would like to also do is start creating an operating reserve for that at 22% to make sure that we have some reserve scheduled. Because we really haven't done that as far as a restricted piece. That if we need it for whatever reason, maybe it's we have a meth unit and we need to loan money to these properties so that we don't have a down unit and we're not losing revenue, but those properties would then pay us back. So little things like that, or if we just run into certain circumstances that we need an operating reserve.
So what it's telling me, so the restricted reserve, the restricted reserve is an operating reserve that I want to hold at 22%, so that's basically 3 months operating expenses. So that's assuming that catastrophic failure and you can't get any revenue for 3 months, this will carry us for 3 months. It gives us the capability of what Kendra's saying is to go, well, that we have a fund balance of 2.75, so we have a method to it. So maybe we do it there, or whatever it is, it may make more sense to take it out of the operating reserve based on the, but if we take it out of there, we gotta replace it in the next budget year to get the 22%. So what really becomes more of a liquid reserve is that line below in terms of what we can use. But what this is also telling me is, and it's a little bit different, but we need a project to come in, like we need another project around 2028, 2029. Now, that's saying we continue with this. If we want to reduce our reliance on the general fund, and if you look at the administrative fee there, 1.1, 1.3, so if we want to draw that expense down, we need other projects to bring in more management fees, because that's the other piece of it. So now I think we're in a good spot to now tactically start deciding when we want projects to come online versus scrambling to get projects on so we can add revenue sources. But financially, yeah, this was actually, I was happy when I saw this because this is not where we were. But this is good news. And now we can, so in my mind, 2029, I need one project in that time frame. If we want to tactically approach it, maybe we shoot for one by 27 and one by 29, but we manage the workload and what we're doing so that we're not killing staff like we are right now when we had Crispin, Bill Jomeng, Zinnia, and a set. So there will be balance brought into the system by doing this.
So I know that we went to end at 11 and we haven't gone over some of the stuff, so I just need to know, are we ending at 11? Or are we gonna continue to kind of go over some of this property stuff?
I covered most of my report throughout what we were doing. I think Lauren, you over yours pretty quick.
Yeah, we have a lot of vacancies. It's hard to be money for the attorneys.
Oh, I love this little thing down here, because that, can we have that each month?
I mean, this is to date for the entire year, a vacancy loss.
Right.
So I think,
That's a pretty significant amount of money.
Do you know how many days it's been returned as a regular, a no damage unit just to basically clean and
a
go?
week to 2 weeks, but we're so short-staffed and we have, emergency work orders and we have basically 3 maintenance covering 9 properties right now. Plus on calls. So they're overwhelmed.
So you'd say your average turn is 14 days? If it's a no damage.
And it should be shorter than that.
That kind of goes back to who's doing it, right?
Well, the maintenance staff, so that number is important. So when we talk to them, it's really, I think depending on your perspective, how you view unit turns it's been a bit of a challenge for us. So this number that Lauren's putting in place is an important number because it lets us go, look, if you're not doing this, this is what it's costing us. And this is why we're saying, here's your benchmark time to turn the unit. Because now we're connecting not doing that to a financial consequence to the organization, because it really is negatively impacting the organization financially. So it lets us kind of working through the numbers. That's also the genesis for the additional maintenance position to bring Patrick up, because if they're all working, maybe Patrick can come in and help with the unit turn. Once we stabilize, we've got to stabilize, or maybe it's the property, the maintenance person on property deals with the unit turn, and maybe Patrick's covering some of the emergency issues that are being developed. And so that's the issue, but we got to stabilize it. I mean, that's why the contract money's coming in, is to at least stabilize. And I think once we can stabilize and we can get a sense as to what's really happening, we can't figure it out because they've never been stable in unit terms. So,
And we'll have half of a new team.
right,
Well, and I think, you know, a while back, quite a while back, it seemed to me that we were told at that time, that turnaround time was anywhere from 30 to 60 days, and I thought that was pretty significant. Because that's, you know, almost two times a month, or 2 months of
right.
rent, so, yeah.
Depends how the number is. We gotta be careful in the numbers, and maybe we start breaking it down of unit turn times by condition. Because unfortunately, I think having a unit in good condition
It's rare.
is rare. So in most cases,
That's how
Yeah.
you think.
yeah, in most
Like,
cases,
in my experience, like,
Yeah.
you have one that's like, oh, look at this.
I think the only time you see that is if they moved in, they've only been there a year, they're moving out. We have a lot of people who are long-term tenants, and so it's been lived in. And then places like Aspen Meadows neighborhood, and this is important to know going into having Ascent coming online. Family housing does more damage to units.
Oh, yeah.
And the bigger the unit,
The longer the term, the more materials.
Extra bedrooms back, just extends that. The smaller units are.
So we
I do.
did we fund a full maintenance person for Ascent?
Yes, we did.
Full maintenance, full property management.
Yes.
Yes, because it's gonna need it. And we're sharing.
Okay, do you have anything?
Cameras are gonna be up and running at Village on Main by, I would say, tomorrow.
Full property with the
Yes.
new camera system.
Oh, nice.
So that's very exciting. Waiting for board approval for next week to move forward with the rest of the camera purchases. And then just quick calls for service. Our leading candidate was the Suites at 17. A lot of core follow-ups there. Second was Fall River at 15 due to a problematic resident there.
Is the resident still there?
Not that we know of.
Oh, back. Okay.
Place.
One has moved out,
Fall River,
and one is still there, and we have to go through remediation.
yes.
We have to go through mandatory remediation.
So he's back. Rest of the properties literally have 1 or 0. Village on Main had a few parking calls that were problematic, but other than that, very little calls.
the only thing on the cameras that we did point out is we weren't able originally when we talked to you all to fund the cameras at the suites. That's part of the funding that I don't know if Molly mentioned. We will now have the cameras at the suites.
That's included in
Yeah.
this.
Not to cut anybody off, but does anybody have anything that they want to add before we? One thing that you had mentioned last time was you had some extra in the village only. And wondered if there were any hydrants on how to use that. Have you used it?
I think we're finalizing the numbers right now, based on what we did add on, and what is left, so I could with you what that looks like. And the timeline for which to spend it.
That's what I thought. Okay.
I'm gonna just send me an email and about what your thought is, and then I'll respond and figure out a budget.
So, we just need a motion to adjourn. Glenn? Jen? Or Jared?